Thank you very much, Daniel. Good morning. We live in a time of two great transitions, or I would even say transformations. One is the transformation from analog to digital ICT, and the other one is the transformation from unsustainable use of this planet to sustainable use of this planet. The second transformation has not yet really started, unfortunately, but it will have to happen, either by design or by disaster. We still have the opportunity to choose. I would like to convince you today that we must use the first of these transitions, the digital revolution, to support the ecological transformation. Why do I think that? Look at this picture. This shows the annual rate of extraction of natural resources from the geosphere and the biosphere by mankind. And you see that this rate is increasing from year to year. We arrived now at roughly 10 tons per human being per year. Yes, and it is still increasing. This includes, by the way, the fossil fuels we want to reduce anyway if we want to slow down climate change. But there are many issues with all the other resources we are extracting, and most of these processes are indeed irreversible. Land use change, depletion of fertilizer, minerals, etc., etc. So what we need is a sort of dematerialization of our economy. What does that mean? We need to produce things, more goods and services with less material resource input. That's the increase of resource productivity. Second, in consumption, we will have to be happy with less heavy stuff in the future. So this will not go on that we move so much physical mass around just to consume. Okay? So we will also have to slow down a bit, travel less, etc. We will also have to close material loops. So, and the good idea is digital ICT is the technology that would be the perfect enabler to solve all these problems. But at least currently, it isn't. It isn't because we are using this technology the wrong way. I will present you 3 arguments to justify this central statement. First argument, despite Moore's law, we are using more and more material just for ICT. That's only a small part of all of our resource use, of course. But even within ICT, we are not able to really dematerialize. Let's look at this. The success story is that within 40 years, yes, we were able to increase the integration density of computer chips by a factor of 1 million. So we went from thousands of transistors to billions of transistors on one chip. And you would expect that this dematerializes the whole sector somehow. But it doesn't. Let's just look at the small example, very small example. Switzerland, mobile phones in the 1990s. It's a historical fact that during these 13 years, you can see here, the size and the physical mass of a mobile phone decreased. At the same time, more and more people wanted to have such a phone, and some started to use 2 or 3 of them. And if you multiply this, you have the mass flow caused by mobile phones in Switzerland, which increased and stabilized at a very high level. So, what does it mean? It means that dematerialization at the micro level does not automatically transform into a dematerialization at the macro level. Okay. At the same time, by the way, the material complexity of ICT hardware exploded. We started with 12 metals to build a microprocessor, and today we need half of the periodic table to build a microprocessor. So this is the first technology that needs almost half the periodic table. And this material complexity has consequences. These 50 metals you see here, they have to be mined, and most of them are mined at few places in the world under conditions that are usually not so peaceful. That's also an aspect of it. So what then happens with these metals is that they have a relatively short useful life, which becomes shorter and shorter, by the way, over time. Relatively short useful life in all these nice devices we are using. I love these devices. That's not the issue. These clean devices, and after this relatively short useful life, this becomes e-waste and is then mined again in informal recycling, which is a form of urban mining, actually. More than 10 years ago, my research group started studying these processes first in India, as you can see here, but you can see the same phenomenon in China, in South Africa, everywhere where labor is cheap, people are mining with informal methods from electronic waste. And it is actually quite rational, because the concentration of gold and of copper in this e-waste is higher than in an average mine. So it makes sense to do this. The only problem is that this pollutes the environment, and it also damages the health of the people who are doing this. Okay, so it seems that dematerialization at the micro level does not solve all the material problems we have with the technology. Let's look at energy. Kumi's law says that the energy efficiency of ICT is increasing at a rapid pace. If you go back to the 1940s, actually, when the first computer was built, the first electronic computer was built, and you gave this computer 1 kilowatt hour of energy, what you got was thousands of computations, thousands. Then this went from thousands to millions to billions, and now the device you have on your table right now gives you quadrillions of computations for just 1 kilowatt hour. This is an incredible success story. Yes, we increased energy efficiency by millions of millions in 70 years of ICT history. Okay, so you would expect that the world uses less and less energy for computing. Again, this is not the case. But let me just first explain this example. You can see here my first laptop on which I wrote my PhD thesis in the 1980s. If this laptop would have been large enough to provide the computing power of my today's laptop, I would have needed a personal power plant to carry with me. Yeah? Okay, so this again illustrates the enormous increase, the enormous success of energy efficiency. But at the macro level, the energy at the global scale used for ICT has ever increased and is still increasing. So the year 2007 was an interesting year because the mark of 100 kilowatt hours per human being for ICT was passed in 2007, and of course it is increasing. It still increases. So this is, by the way, not so much. We are spending much more energy on mobility, on housing, on food. ICT is still in the range of 2 or 3% of our total energy consumption. So I'm not saying that this is a big problem. We have other bigger problems. But the take-home message is increasing the efficiency at the technical level does not automatically transform our economic macro system to be more sustainable. This is not an automatic process. It's maybe a necessary condition, but it is not an implication. Okay. Let's briefly go to my last argument. You may know this theory developed by Colin Clark about how economies progress over time to post-industrial economies. During industrialization, the importance of the first sector, agriculture, etc., is going down. And the importance of manufacturing is increasing. And after that, there comes a phase of dematerialization, or no, deindustrialization in this terminology. And this means that the service sector that creates immaterial services is increasing, and you can even divide the service sector into two types of services. The second type, or fourth sector, is then pure information services. But this differentiation is not so important for my argument. I wanted to know what are the countries, the economies which are most advanced in this development. And if you look at statistics, you see that 18 countries are, these are the 18 countries with the highest service sector output. So Switzerland is number 18, that's why I cut there. I wanted to have Switzerland as an example on these statistics. So we are number 18 in service sector output, although we are so small. How would this look like if we divide by population? So per capita service sector output. This would be a more fair comparison, actually, and it looks like that. Per capita service sector output is this orange bar here, and you see that then we are top. Switzerland is the country with the highest service sector output, because we are doing so immaterial things like just thinking, computing, consulting, moving money around. Yes? Okay. So, you would also expect that we are less polluting or less material in what we are doing. And for this, there is another statistics. This is the official federal statistics of an indicator called TMR, Total Materials Requirement, that just looks at the materials used by an economy, no matter where they are taken from. And what you can see here is, first of all, we use per Swiss person, we use 40 tons of materials per year, which is 4 times the global average. And you see that two-thirds of these resources are extracted somewhere else. And half of it never reach Switzerland. These are the so-called indirect material flows. That means that we are not really dematerialized. We just outsourced the heavy work or the dirty work to other countries. And it is completely obvious that this type of post-industrial economy cannot be copied by everyone in the world. Yes? If China or India would try to be such an economy, they would need another planet to outsource their two-thirds of resources extraction. So it is not sustainable. Okay, so 40 tons per person is, as I said, factor 4 above the global average. And if this would be delivered to me once a year, it would look like that, and another truck would come for my wife, and another truck for my daughter, etc. Okay. So, it seems that it is not so easy to translate the digital revolution into something that dematerializes our society, and dematerialization is one of the necessary conditions for sustainability. And this is because we are using ICT the wrong way. And now you may ask me, what would it mean to use ICT the right way? I want to rephrase this question the following way. How would we use ICT if if prices of all products would tell the truth about carbon emissions, about pollution, about land use change, about resource depletion, about labor conditions, and all other externalities. Because these external costs are currently not included in the prices we pay for the material resources and for energy. So because this is not included, we have the wrong incentives for our innovation and production. So how would we use ICT if we had the right incentives? We would probably create a self-sufficient communications infrastructure. We could do that. In 10 or 20 years from now, it will be possible to create long-lasting communications nodes, network nodes, that harvest energy from their environment. There are already such things starting now, but it will improve. The efficiency will further improve, and you will then maybe have such an infrastructure, and we will forget about such companies like internet service providers or something like that. There will be just an infrastructure that is there as a public good, and nobody will force us to change versions of something and always to buy new stuff. So we could just use this. So that's one idea. A second idea is we will not be able to fly around the world anymore at such a high pace as we do. So transportation is one of the biggest problems at the moment in terms of CO2 emissions and other problems. We are already, of course, thinking on and trying to connect places. Let's say there is someone at A and someone at B, or a conference at A and a conference at B, and we can connect this. If you see here in the middle of the screen, you can see how we connected two conferences in Switzerland and Japan. We connected even the coffee breaks and everything. You can do that. But I think the future will be that people at A and B both go to C, and C is a virtual space. So we meet in virtual spaces to collaborate, to do things we couldn't even do in reality. So it must be better than travel. Yeah, it must be better than to travel, to use this virtual space to collaborate or to do whatever people do. Maybe, I wouldn't even exclude that our grandchildren will have cyber sex in a virtual space or whatsoever. So we don't know. But it is, I think, necessary as soon as we have the correct price of transportation. Okay. We would probably also try to recycle everything. Our today's recycling technology is extremely unintelligent, yes? But if we would put the whole power of artificial intelligence into recycling technology, we would create something like the digital version of the garbage disposal pig you may know from the Flintstones movies, cartoons. It doesn't have to look like Wall-E, of course. This is just because I had no other idea how it could look like, but everyone could have at home a sort of a recycling robot that tries to create material value from everything you want to get rid of. There is absolutely no reason why this should not work. The only problem is that recycling needs energy, and you cannot improve this energy efficiency above a certain level. This has physical reasons. Yes, this is the second law of thermodynamics that prevents you from being able to recycle to create pure materials without energy. And that's why this would be energy intensive, and that's why we should use renewable energy for these recycling robots. And that means that we can use the excess energy. You know, we have fluctuating supply in renewable energy today. When the sun is shining and the wind is blowing, we have more electricity than we can use already, and this will increase, this phenomenon will increase, and it is difficult to store energy. There are lots of discussion of how to store electricity in the future, but instead of storing energy as energy, we can try to store energy as material purity. So whenever the wind is blowing and the sun is shining, we wake up our robot army of recycling robots and store energy in form of purity. So maybe you have other ideas of how we can use ICT to really dematerialize. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lorenz. We have a few questions, and by the way, you can ask questions. You just have to tweet them, #lift16. If you want to ask questions to our speakers, we're listening all the time, we're taking the questions, and then maybe not all of them, but most of them will be asked to our speakers. So very quickly, you're facing a bunch of innovators, entrepreneurs, or sometimes also investors. If based on this, you have maybe 1 or 2 recommendations on how they can go about in doing their own project, their own IT-related project, maybe what would you recommend to them? What message would you want to send?
Yes, I think they should not innovate under the conditions of today's economy and today's prices. You should innovate for a future situation in which materials and energy are really expensive. That's the point.
And so would there be a recommendation maybe for policymakers then? Would that be the recommendation, real prices, or something else?
Well, that's an old discussion. How could we internalize external costs of everything into the prices by eco-tax and such things? That's still a valid idea, of course. It has been politically brought up and down several times during decades. Yes, I hope this will come up again, yes.
And maybe the last short question. So you've been very instrumental in creating this research community called ICT4S. Do you think there's enough effort there? Do you think it's a big enough community? Are you facing obstacles?
Well, everybody is welcome to join this community, of course. We really need people who think out of the box. Yes, I think this is always necessary. Think of innovations in ICT that are made for a future sustainable world and not for today's world. That's the big challenge, and we cannot have enough people who join us, of course. You're very welcome to think with us. Just write me an email and I can invite you to our next workshops, conferences, whatsoever.
Thank you so much, Lorenz.